So hello everyone watching on YouTube, all you 5 sneaky people that are watching, and 1 comment, Indica Head Shop, what's going on? So it's podcast 176 with myself, Stephen.
Myself, Barry.
And we have 2 guests, the first of 2019.
Hey, breaking the 2019 guest cherry.
Yes, I like it. I like it because you know why? Because I haven't had to do much research, just brush up skills. Today's podcast is all about VPD.
Say that again.
I'm going to get you to say it. Say it.
Say it in little letters.
No, say it. VPD.
VPD.
It's all about the VPD.
VPD.
You say it.
VPD.
Go on.
VPD.
VPD. Who is it that says stuff like that?
Sounds like a band, VPD.
Are you going to see VPD tomorrow night? Sick.
Coffee BT.
Why would you bring that up?
Antibiotics for VPD.
I was about to say, it sounds like a return trip from a dodgy weekend.
Would be Barry that catches the VPD, wasn't it? Right? So it's all about VPD. If you don't know what that is, it's vapor pressure deficit, and it's an in-depth look at humidity and the correlation between humidity and temperature and the room. Now, you should have probably heard about VPD by now. If you haven't, then we're going to recap humidity and temperature and the impact that plays in your grow room. But we're also going to take it a step further, because I do get a lot of comments and messages saying that the knowledge that we bring is really good, but we want to now start attracting the growers that know all of the basics, and we're going to try and start pushing that knowledge forward. So we're going to we wouldn't be able to do this podcast without our partners. Partners have been the reason this podcast has been reignited, restarted for 2019. So we're going to say a big thank you to AutoPot watering systems, the gravity-fed system for growing your plants. Who else, Barry?
We've got CANNA, one of the main men.
What about women?
Women and men.
No, one of the main people.
No, might keep coming off though.
Keeps doing funny stuff, yeah.
Coatsy.
Stop playing with that though. That's Barry just likes fiddling with stuff, doesn't he? He's playing with the knobs, aren't you?
Man just keeps going.
You keep on like. Does yours do that?
Yeah, man's finger.
On, off.
Yeah, like a little bit of an up and down. See, Coatsy's got this new piece of kit, and when Coatsy gets a new piece of kit,
Fiddles.
he fiddles, and it's got teething problems.
And he doesn't. He gets it right, then just fiddle. Look, doing it again.
Yeah,
and then just fiddles even more.
He's not doing anything apparently. I think it's your connector, Barry.
Is anyone else just doing it?
Mine's going in it.
Yeah.
Like there, it suddenly dropped.
Yeah. And Josh's was putting it himself. Is doing it as well. Coatsy, come on, lad, you got to sort it out. You got to put him under pressure.
With a name and shame. Yeah.
So the partners: AutoPot watering systems, CANNA.
We've got SANlight.
SANlight, the LEDs, especially important at this time of year. I think a lot of people are going to start jumping onto SANlight LEDs because they don't produce any heat. Revolution Microelectronics, the double-ended HPS, the ceramic metal halides, and the Avicii LED. And we also have can, fan, and filters. Very important to choose your right can, fan, and filter, because if you don't super spec your outtake, then you need to over spec so that you can at least always put it on a dimmer. If you're under spec, then you've just got to put your fan and filter to one side, go to the shop and buy a whole new fan and filter. So super important. Over spec your fan and filters, and use our partners, can, fan, and filters. They're the best. Right, Coatsy, this is where you're going to put the intro. Let's go.
All good? Ready to go? Turn my voice up a little bit. Oh, God, for everyone watching, the whole family. Are you ready to go? I built a piece in the house that I built, in the booth that I built. I know people tune in every Sunday to listen, but even when business is good, we still manage to do the podcast. NPK.
Right. I'm going to do some comments, just the first one that's come up. Interesting, just ran a test with low VPD and now high, much better results, higher VPD /humidity from Indica Head Shop. And Richard Kaya says, hi, Peter.
Wow. Hi back, Richard.
So we're going to talk about VPD, temperature and humidity. So temperature and humidity, you know what to talk about on temperature and humidity. You know what the temperature should be, you know what the humidity should be all the way through grow.
Yeah.
But as with everything, it gets a little bit more complicated than that. And that's where we're now moving on to VPD, vapor pressure deficit. Now, I'm going to give an explanation or a description, and then I'm going to look to Peter to give his description. And if we can describe it slightly differently, then we might be able to, because I think if we could all give descriptions of it, it'd be great, but we're going to give 2 definitions of VPD. I'm going to go first because if I hit the nail on the head, then you can...
And if you're wrong, and if he's wrong, you can nail him and tell him.
Okay, so vapor pressure deficit, it's the difference in pressure between in the room at the 100% humidity and the room and the potential humidity that it can have, and the difference in pressure. But that sort of definition didn't make much sense to me. And when I looked at what it means to plants, it's the difference in pressure between the room in kilopascals of the temperature and the amount of water it can hold, the humidity. And basically inside the plant leaf, it's always 100% humidity. So the difference in pressure, so if it's low humidity or high VPD, then the plant can lose a lot of water. It can transpire easily because there's little pressure. So there's nothing pushing that water back into the leaf, if that makes sense. Whereas if you have a high VPD and a low humidity, this is where it gets confusing. If you have a high VPD and a low humidity, it can lose water, it can transpire easily. If it has a low VPD and a high humidity, then it can't transpire as easily because the pressure's greater.
Yeah.
Now I need you to explain it in my terms.
All right, so in your terms, it's pretty much bang on there. What you've got is, so the humidity in the room and your plant, as Stephen was saying, the humidity in that leaf is considered to be 100%. If the room is at 100% humidity as well, there's no difference in the humidity between the leaf and the room. Essentially, there's nowhere for anything to transpire. Nothing can evaporate out. So it's got very, very low vapor pressure deficit. There's not a difference between them. Yeah. As the humidity comes down, there's more and more potential for the moisture in the leaf to evaporate into the environment.
Yeah, because it's higher.
Yeah, because the leaf is still at 100%, the room's now at 80%. And then as you bring it down to 70%, et cetera, the need to transpire gets more and more and more. So the vapor pressure has gone up. It's actually trying to push more water out, which in turn is going to put more load on the root system. But you run into this problem at a point where it's a combination of temperature and humidity. It's not just a humidity value. And the catch is, as the temperature goes up, the plant starts to shut down as well. So that's where a very high humidity would indicate that the plant actually doesn't want to transpire anymore. You're running that risk where it's thinking it's going to dehydrate. It doesn't know it's plugged into a permanent water supply, and it just does what it does naturally, and the stomata start to close, and it will start to reduce how well the plant is performing. So with VPD, for every plant, there is an ideal VPD for that plant at the temperature that it's best to grow it at. So there you'll find that, for one plant, it's 22 degrees centigrade, and you want a VPD of 8. So that would probably be, say VPD of 8. The next bit, as Stephen mentioned, how it's measured. You get kilopascals, pascals, and hectopascals as probably being the 3 ways that you'll see VPD being represented. And if it's represented as kilopascals, they would say it's 0.18. Yeah. If it's being measured in hectopascals, which is how we do it, we'll say it's 1.8 because it's just easier. It rolls off the tongue. If you're doing it in pascals, it's going to be like 1,800 if I'm quickly doing the math. Which again, it's just too much to say. So we actually find using the hectopascals just makes it easier. So we will say 1.8. Most people on some of the charts will see that as 0.18. Yeah. And that, with a temperature of 22 degrees centigrade, you're probably looking at about 70% humidity to give you a VPD. Wouldn't be 1.8. I mean, that's probably about the 8 range, which is ideal. It's keeping it nice and comfortable. It's not working too hard. The plant is in a comfortable place.
And for people that are listening and thinking, what do these numbers mean? don't, because these numbers, to be honest, don't mean a huge deal to me, because none of us operate, or very, very, very few of us operate looking at VPD and looking at kilopascals and pascals of the room. So when you think, if we talk about numbers, don't get too bogged down with the numbers that we're speaking about, because they will become, you'll learn those as you get familiar with VPD. Like, just like when you didn't used to pH and you're like, what does 5.8 mean? And when you didn't used to EC, what the hell does 1.2 mean EC? What's 600 and 1200 parts per million? That makes no sense to me. Now, you're looking at that and you're going, oh, well, so 1200 parts per million or 1.5 EC is great for this part of grow. Yeah. And you get used to the numbers
it's just
eventually.
You're going to pick up anyway.
Yeah, you're going to pick them up. So as Peter and Lee might mention numbers, don't get bogged down by the numbers. Don't try and remember them or learn them, because they will come naturally. There's a nice
chart for that, actually. If you look up, Google a VPD chart, you can actually see how all the numbers correlate with the temperature and humidity. And I find generally when I'm trying to explain VPD to people, if I show them that chart, you'll see there's a green band that curves with the temperature and the humidity. And so once you've seen it,
it starts to make a bit more sense, doesn't it?
It does.
So
a quick tip there: in the last issue of Garden Culture magazine, there is that chart in the magazine.
I had the VPD chart in the last edition of Garden Culture. Also, when I was doing my Googling this afternoon or this morning, if you type in what is VPD, the first website that comes out is by Just for Growers. If a lot of people will be familiar with that website and that YouTube channel, and they have a lovely chart on there. And you can actually, if you download their chart, then you can change the Celsius or Fahrenheit. You can change the humidity ratings, and you can actually do, you can even start getting really in depth and start looking at the leaf temperature compared to the room temperature. So if you want a leaf temperature to -2 degrees cooler than your room, you can start putting that into the graph. So the top tip from the start of the podcast is try and get yourself onto one of the websites. Google what is VPD, and as you listen to the podcast, pause it now, go on Google and look at the chart. It will help to make a lot more sense as we're talking about VPD. So Barry, let's go through the fundamentals and the basics again. Temperature. If it's too hot, it's going to cause problems, isn't it?
It certainly is.
And if it's too hot, when I say too hot, anything 30 degrees above is going to start getting to the realms of too hot. But if you can somehow increase your relative humidity, then it's going to have less of an impact. It's going to be less stressful for the plant. The problem comes when you've got high temperatures and really low humidity. Because what that means is the room can hold a lot of water as the temperature increases. But because you've got low relative humidity, then that vapor pressure deficit is going to be up. Yeah, you got to get it's basically the opposite of humidity. When humidity goes up, VPD comes down. Correct. When VPD goes up, humidity comes down. So it's just inverse of what humidity is. So the plant can potentially lose a lot of water to the environment, and that's stressful if it hasn't got a readily available source of water. Now we go through one of the main things that everybody will know by now, and we've been harping on about it for years, is that in veg, you want a higher humidity because you don't want to put any stress on the plant. When they get into mid-veg to early flower, you want to drop that humidity so that they start drinking a bit more and the plants are more prepared for it. And then late flower, you want that humidity around 40 to 50% because you want the plants drinking and they can cope with it. And the low humidity means that you've got you're less likely to get molds and pests and all kinds. But that might not necessarily be the best way to grow a plant, might it?
And that's actually something that shocks people when they get into looking at VPD, is they're used to running a room at 27 degrees and 50% humidity. And then you look at that on the VPD chart, and that has you so far out of the comfort zone. It's a bit of a wake-up call. And then people will suddenly switch to, okay, let me bring the humidity up. And at 27 degrees, you're probably looking at a humidity of about 70-75%. So that's quite high all of a sudden. As you say, that makes people get uncomfortable because they're thinking, okay, now this level of humidity, molds become more of a risk.
Fruit rot, everything.
Yeah, and a lot of that now comes down to airflow. So with the rest of your environment, what you now really with the high humidity is a problem is lack of airflow. And when
movement and exchange. You've got to have both. Because you just keep recirculating it, it's going to settle. Whereas if you're drawing fresh
draw
air
it
through
out.
and you're circulating it, then it doesn't settle on the plant.
Yeah,
and
it's not getting time to settle, is
you're
it?
not stressing it because it can transpire. But yeah, the humidity's high, but the air movement is key.
Yeah.
So the humidity can stay the same as long as you've got good air movement in the room and a good extraction, which is exchanging it.
Or in a sealed environment where you're truly sealed room, so long as you've got the your humidifier and dehumidifier correctly dialed in, and you can keep it in check. The danger at the higher humidities is when like lights go out and you have a sudden drop in temperature where you'll hit dew point. And that's really where the risk comes in. It's not, I think the high humidity is actually not too much of a problem. And, these plants thrive in high humidity.
With the lights on.
With the lights on, it's warm and there's a lot of air movement. If you look at any tropical coastal dwelling plants, I mean, they live in very high humidity, very warm. Yeah. But being on the coast, they've got constant, I mean, you go on a holiday in the tropics, what is it? It's windy all the time, so they have that going for them. But then at nighttime there as well, the temperature drop-off is quite gradual. Everything is time to settle and stabilize. In artificial environments, you tend to find lights go off, temperature tanks by 10 degrees or 5 degrees.
Everything changes rapid.
And suddenly you hit dew point. If you can delay that temperature drop-off at night to be over an hour rather than in 3 minutes, it gives the room and everything in it time to sort of equalize and come back down.
We were talking about that not long ago, weren't we? And light patterns as well.
Come back to that.
Yeah, no, go on, because when you come back to it, you always forget.
You'll never remember that.
No, that's true. That was one of the things that we found with the data logging and looking at it over time, is that when you turn the lights off, the humidity goes up so much. Whereas if you're running high temperatures, you need a humidifier. If you turn it off, say half an hour to an hour before the lights go off, then when that change comes, it just brings you back up to you're not likely to hit dew point. It just softens out that sudden drop.
We were talking about that, weren't we, about light patterns, the way people go on 18 hours and 6 hours off and 12 hours on, 12 hours off. But even that must have a big major impact, mustn't it, to just from being bright light to just instant darkness. And like you say, it changes everything else then, doesn't it? There's a big swing.
Trying to stop the swings and keep the plant as stable as possible. It's another podcast in itself, and one for the future.
It should be a gradual build up and then a gradual decline. If that's the right word.
Recreate nature as best you can. Everything else is synthetic, but if you can recreate the light cycle, the temperature,
definitely,
then you're not going to have them big swings and everything.
And to explain dew point as well, for those that might not understand it properly, it's the best way the way that I understood it was that when you have a really hot day, like it is today, and if you can hear any background noise, it's because we have to have the windows open. It is roasting. And also a good reason to talk about VPD, because you've got to be on the ball with your room, and knowing about VPD will allow you to cope with these higher temperatures. So good podcast to listen to on this hot day. So dew point is when you have a hot day like it is today, then the temperature's 25, 26 degrees right now in Liverpool. And the air can hold a lot of water. Now, as it cools, and it's coolest obviously around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, just before the sun starts to come up, then the environment, its ability to hold water decreases, and it can get to around 100% saturation. When it reaches 100% saturation, the water's got nowhere to go, so it has to go on, it has to settle, it has to condense out of the air, and that's where you get morning dew on the grass, because the air can no longer hold all of the moisture and it has to settle somewhere. That's what the dew point is, if you get that indoors. Also, I knew about this phenomenon, but I've just learned the word for it: guttation. Have you heard of that?
No.
Guttation. It happens on specific plants when the vapor pressure deficit is so high within the plant and has to somehow release moisture. It can actually, on certain plants, push water or sap out of its leaves. And there's some gorgeous pictures of, if you Google guttation on plants, you can actually see a leaf with all its razor edges, with water droplets on every single razor blade. That's quite an interesting phenomenon within plants. Guttation. Google it, Barry. Oh, well. You'll like it.
Only on the tips of the leaf.
Just on the very tips of the leaf.
Smallest part.
Yeah. Okay. It's a very interesting point. Well, very interesting to see. It was a gorgeous photograph, and I looked further into the photograph and thought, what's that about? I thought it was just the dew, and it wasn't. It was the leaf forcing all of the water out, because its vapor pressure deficit inside the leaf was high, and it must have been too low outside, or something was happening.
I mean, another technique for dealing with that is to go down, going down negative diff route.
Yeah.
So your nighttime temperature being higher than your daytime temperature. That's one way of also dealing with the dew point side of things. But then you still got to watch out for it when you're coming from, night into day. But you do suddenly have lights kicking on, all that infrared radiation, if you're doing it under HID lights, for instance. That will certainly help boil it off very quickly. You wouldn't have dew hanging around for very long.
Yeah.
But that's a tricky one to play. You kind of know what you're doing.
You don't want to run negative diff in a small room, that's for sure.
Yeah. That could be quite similar to like having your nighttime temperatures being higher than your daytime temperatures.
Yeah.
So that's what, So, and that could, it's not something that we've experimented with, but it could also help reduce stretch as well.
Yeah, a lot of the ornamental flower growers and that market, they use negative diff for doing just that.
Yeah.
When they can control how fast things are growing, when they need to slow it down, they just bump the temperatures up.
Yeah, nice. Well, we've had the comment, and it's reminded me actually. Someone said, "Is that guy South African?" And I'm dying to reply to say no, just an angry Australian. I think South African accent just sounds like an Australian that's really angry.
Yes, I am originally from South Africa. Yes.
People love it when you have accents on the podcast.
Been here for 20 plus years for my sins.
Yeah,
actually, quite a bit more than 27 years now.
Obviously, you love it here. You wouldn't be able to do 27 years. How often do you manage to get back to the
I haven't been back for years now. I haven't been back for at least 8 years.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's expensive to go. I'd rather spend the money going somewhere I haven't been before, to be quite honest.
Making kick-ass controllers.
Yeah, exactly. It's not cheap to do that in terms of lifestyle. It takes up everything else.
I'm just going to look at Coty because obviously with his new piece of kit, we're going to look at some. He's downloaded some what do you call them, pops or beats or something that you can press. But as how are your earphones? What's it sound like in your earphones?
Sound.
Is it good for you?
Can I get an applause?
Mine's gone a little bit tinny.
No, mine's all right.
Oh, Josh is clapping. Let's see what. Now he's good. Oh, he's knackered all the buttons up now.
And so something else to bear in mind with VPD, for the practical side of it, and what it actually means when you're growing is, so as that VPD value is going up, the plant is technically going to get thirstier. It's not going to get hungrier. And you guys often talk about how in the middle of winter you want a heavy, stodgy meal, and when in the summer you want a light drink. And it's now, the trick is you've got to start to reduce the strength of your nutrient solution. It's wanting to drink 2 liters, not a liter of water. Don't go and keep your nutrient strength at the same level that it was at previously. So usually that will suddenly see, everything's getting nutrient burn because it's just actually consuming too much. And it'll leave a lot more in the actual grow medium as well. I mean, the plant's going to just try and pull water out. It doesn't want all the nutrients you're putting in there.
I think that's mad. Like, plants are proper. It might sound soft, but plants are intelligent. Or there's environmental, there's evolutionary intelligence in there because plants are separate. Like, they're physically pulling, like this is a mixture of salty mixture when we feed plants, and they are physically pulling out just water and leaving the salts behind. Like, it's something that I haven't researched. It might sound soft to a plant biologist. He's like, well, that's simple. Like, it's because of this, and this. But it's impressive, and it's a great point to make because it's all about plant steering wheels, and it's the two points that come to mind is, like you've said, steering the plant, feeding. And it's great in DWC because you can see when plants are taking water, and you can see when plants are feeding. But a good point, I think, that will make people understand, that will hit home the importance of temperature, humidity, and why we need to start moving on to VPD, is because let's say you're running a room at 28 degrees Celsius and it's 50% relative humidity, and you manage to get your temperatures down a little bit to, let's say, 24, 25, and you've set your humidifiers and your dehumidifiers, or your air controller is set, I want it at 50% humidity. You've dropped the temperature but kept the humidity the same. Now you start to play with the pressure difference, the VPD of the plants in the room. Similarly, is if your temperature is at 26 degrees and you increase or decrease the humidity, and you're getting it to what you think is a good point, you're messing about with the pressure deficits, and there's a lot going on within the plant. So even though plant growth is simple, and it's good to keep it simple, then there's also, like, you can go so far down a rabbit hole with this stuff. It's mental. And I think temperature and humidity, environment is key. VPD is one of the main things that I want to get advanced on. I want our listeners to start getting advanced on because it's super important. So we're going to, with VPD, I think it's important just to give people a bit of a taster of it. So now that everyone that's listening knows what VPD is, and I would, if you're interested in it and you want to take your growth to the next level, then do some Googling, do some research, buy an environment book, or maybe we'll be doing a more in-depth VPD when I understand more about it, because it's that new. I don't think anybody really fully understands VPD, and the people that do, it's super complicated.
I mean, the thing is, it's being used in larger ag and horticulture and greenhouses for a very long time.
20 years or so,
that's where they're using it to regulate how big your tomatoes are getting, to stop them splitting. That's what they're playing around with. And you mentioned something earlier that was interesting about, measuring leaf temperature as well as ambient temperature and having to do the -2 degree calculation and all of that. So yes, I mean, if you're already getting down into the heavy science of VPD at the leaf level, you should be measuring the leaf temperature of every single leaf in your space.
Not the one at the top of the canopy.
Well, you need to measure all the ones at the top, and I mean literally every single leaf temperature, which is just crazy. I mean, it's not practical to do that. No. So this is where you take it to the nth degree, which is where it needs to be for pure science. Great, but practically that doesn't work. And even the big greenhouse control guys have all come to the same conclusion. You just need to put the sensors as close to the leaves as possible, so that you're measuring the temperature as close to that leaf as possible, as well as the humidity that's as close to that leaf as possible. The humidity over here and the humidity over here in terms of the leaf could be grossly different. So when you are measuring VPD, don't stick your ambient temperature and humidity sensor above the canopy, because you've got the VPD above the canopy, great. It should probably be incredibly high. It's going to be very dry and hot air up there. Sticking it down in the middle of the canopy is going to give you probably the best representation of what's going on.
To adjust it as well.
Yeah, to adjust it as well. And that's also where all the microclimates occur. They don't occur above the canopy.
No.
They're hidden away inside the canopy, and as plants are growing, those canopies get denser, so they create problems with airflow. And I think that's a really key factor in most grow spaces, is having correct airflow and being able to then measure that airflow in terms of putting sensors around a room, either taking your one sensor and moving it around and recording every way that you go, or using data loggers where you can actually put 4 or 5 of them in and then see how they will react over time. Because you'll be able to pick out, that's a cold spot, that's a hot spot, I need to just adjust my fans.
Yeah. Most people don't know that there's actually 2 environments in the grow room. There's your grow room environment, and then there's the microclimate around every single individual leaf. And there's the CO2 climate around the leaves, there's the humidity and the temperature and the leaf temperature. So as the leaves transpire and they lose water to the to your grow room, that's why the leaves tend to be cooler. If you've got an infrared thermometer, you can buy them from most grow shops, and you point it at your leaf, it should technically read a couple of degrees lower. If your plant's really performing well and transpiring nicely, it could even read 4 to 5 degrees lower than the outdoor room. I keep on saying the outdoor room, than the indoor grow room. And so this is the importance of it. Leaves transpire to cool themselves. If they can't cool themselves, then they're going to close up stomata, because they can't cool themselves. They're going to close the stomata so that they're not going to potentially lose too much water, or they're going to be off balance. What you need to get this just right, so that the stomata are open, it's not losing too much water, and it's not losing no water where it doesn't. If it loses no water, then it's not transpiring at all, and it's not taking up new nutrients, not taking up new water, and it can't cool itself. So too much either way, you're going to have problems. And now VPD, again, Google it, because everyone listening is going to understand it. It is that complicated. Like I looked up how do you calculate VPD, and you look at saturated air relative humidity, you look at which is SAR, and you calculate it by a mathematical degree. If you look up literally how to calculate VPD, your mind will be blown.
This is something I'm going to have to go home and Google.
Don't Google it. You won't come into work tomorrow. Do not Google how to calculate VPD. Anybody. Because unless you're a mathematician and you love that horrible hardcore math shit, don't Google that shit.
Dear.
Now I've said don't do it. Everyone's going to do it, aren't they? So if you can't Google it and how to do it, then is there a monitor anyway that would help you measure VPD? Do you know of any?
I mean, you should mention that.
I don't know. A non spring to mind. Anything?
Well, I can think of one. This British company that's fairly innovative.
What are they called?
Run by an angry Australian, maybe? Australian.
Hey, I've got
Australian.
I've got the passport, mate.
What have we got?
So from P&L Grow Systems, we've got the Minder unit, which is a data logger. And this will allow you to record data throughout the day. I mean, permanently. It's a Wi-Fi device, which maybe we can come on to that a little bit later. But what it allows you to do is to have data recorded every 30 seconds. And we found that was a granular enough time slice to take. Any less, going down to like every 10 seconds was just a bit crazy on things. And any less than that, in terms of every minute, because we do have control systems, any less than that, we found that it just wasn't quick enough. We needed the feedback to come in a little bit quicker when we're controlling things. So each of the Minder units comes with 2 sensors on it, but they give you 3 data points. The one sensor is a waterproof temperature sensor, so you can use it for measuring the root zone temperature or your DWC tank or your nutrient reservoir, whatever you were doing, or I just need another air temperature sensor. And the other one is an ambient temperature and humidity sensor, and it's actually that one that we use for doing our VPD calculation, because you want the temperature and humidity from the same point that you're measuring. So that does...
And you were saying at the beginning before we went live that it's the placement of that sensor. We were actually hoping to disagree, because when you disagree, you have good discussions. But unfortunately, we actually agree on this point.
Yeah, Stephen agrees with me that it's going to be placed at least 3 feet above the canopy.
No, right in the middle of the canopy, maybe even an inch below the top canopy. Just if you place it too high, and this is a good top tip for everybody listening, whether it's VPD with the Minder unit or it's temperature and humidity with just a basic thermometer. If you have it in between your light and the plant, then the light hitting normally the silver sensor actually heats up the sensor and gives you a bit of a false reading. So if you do have it there, just make yourself a little bit of a paper curtain or umbrella. Make
shade.
Sure that, get it in shade so it's actually recording the temperature of the room. Better still, put it just below the first, the newest growth of the plant, and then you're getting what the environment within the plant, and you're going to take proper measurements now.
Yeah.
And we agreed on that, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Discussion over.
And the other part is actually measuring floor level temperature. You don't necessarily have to, measuring the root zone is great, especially if you're growing in a greenhouse outdoors. Well, obviously, we would be growing outdoors in a greenhouse.
I make them all the time.
But when it comes to planting out, you want to make sure that you're not going to shock the roots, that the actual ground's up to temperature, and keep an eye on it. In my greenhouse, that's what I do. So when I'm going to go and plant the chilies out, I've actually, the soil temperature is staying above 12 degrees continuously. And growth will accelerate when you put it in. It's not going to be sitting there waiting. But also in the closed indoor grow spaces, knowing that lower level temperature is really important. You mentioned dew point earlier. Everybody walks into a grow space and tends to be, it's great. How many people walk in barefoot? Yeah. Because that's where all the cool air is coming in, especially with passive air intake, to be sucking air in at the ground level. Yeah. 75% humidity at 28 degrees centigrade is 100% humidity at about 22 degrees centigrade. So all of a sudden, down the lower part of your environment, you're getting condensation forming. It's in those dark, dank little corners where the mold starts to happen now. And you're not looking there. It's not on your mind to look there. I think a lot of people, if you're living in a cold climate in the middle of winter, when that cold air is being pulled in, if you actually look down, you'll see condensation around like the lower foot of your environment.
That's a great point. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's less likely to happen in the summer when you could be drawing in warmer air, but in the winter, definitely when you're in indoor grow rooms and in some greenhouses where you use supplemental lighting, you've got those high temperature lights, so just beneath there could be 28, 27 degrees. Around the plant canopy level could be 25, 26, and you're drawing in that cold winter air, it could be 10 degrees at the bottom, 12 degrees. As soon as it mixes with the air, it does start to cool it, but definitely by your intake and on that lowest level, there's going to be a massive
we've got Canadian clients who, they talk about, I'm pulling air in from outside that could be coming in at minus 20. That's where it starts. 0% humidity, but really cold. And as soon as it comes in, it's just condensation.
Everywhere.
So they have that problem. But then they have the reverse in the middle of summer, of course, because it goes the other way, and they've got all this hot air to deal with.
Yeah, it's mental. Absolutely mental. I think we spoke about it a few weeks ago, didn't we? About using things like the diffuse air. If you can try and get that temperature and humidity as even as possible all around the grow room, your plants are going to be more well behaved for you, and you're going to be able to control your temperature and humidity, and more specifically your VPD better when your whole room is saying the same thing rather than having different levels of temperatures and humidities. Yeah. So if we put one of these Minder units into our room, what's it going to tell us? What's it going to do? Most people by now should have a temperature, and it should have a hygrometer. So you should have something in there measuring your temperature, measuring your humidity. At the minimum, if you haven't, I say this every time now, stop the podcast.
And go on by
stop, pause.
Log on to www.
By 2.
By 2, yeah. By 3, and just, we're going to cause it for being a dick tax. Because you haven't got 1, you now need to buy 3. Now, if you've got 1, buy 2. If you've got 2, buy another 2. Because it's that important to get your overall temperature and humidity. But I've been using, over the last 9 months to 12 months, in our room, we've been using an air comfort, and we've been using it for the tomatoes. Chelsea Flower Show's just around the corner, and we've got a mint collection as well. That's going to be a Chelsea Flower Show. So we've been using it in there because obviously it's the national mint collection. It needs to be perfect. So we've been using this thing called an air comfort, uses Bluetooth technology, and since I've been using that, my head's been blown by, like, I can't believe I just use a thermometer hygrometer. Yeah. You walk in, it tells you the maximum,
the minimum,
and then it tells you what it is right at that very second. And since using this is a Bluetooth data logger, you can go in and go, I got to 30 degrees, but it was only for 5 minutes. Just heater kicked in by accident, and then it went back off. So nothing to worry about there. Let's change the heater settings because it's coming on too early. So it's little things like that. Also, if it gets a huge spike in the middle of the day,
with a normal hygrometer, you don't know how long it's spiked. That's just giving you the max and the minimum.
Exactly.
With the air comfort, it's telling you how long it's been like that.
All over. And they've been doing really well. But what I like about the Minder is that there's a bigger plan for this information, isn't there?
Correct,
And you've got a massive project in America, or you're about to start a big project in America.
We've actually it started last week, was the inaugural kickoff of what's called Operation Grow.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that, because this sounds interesting.
Yeah, so Operation Grow is actually a sort of sub thing of what we're doing, and it's to allow people to get objective data back on their products. So whether you are a seed producer or a nutrient company, or you want to test some lights, or you want to have something else tested, clearly what's missing out of the industry is being the third-party independent data validator to say that this is the actual data that goes with that product. And Operation Grow is really an attempt at doing that. So the very first one we're doing is with 10 growers in North America, all in legal states. They've been given a cultivar from a seed producer in North America, and they don't know what it is necessarily. They don't have like the full lineage of it. And they're all growing it, starting at exactly the same time. And the whole thing's being recorded on our platform, where it's also, we have a journal function, so you can actually journal your grow. It's recording the events you're carrying out along with the environmental timeline. So when you look back, you can see, I watered it on this day, I did this, I did that. You actually have the events plotted out. To be at the very end of the cycle, to then say, let's look at everything that came out of it. Let's see the final yields and crops and look at them and look back at all the data that was and see which bits.
So you can pinpoint the right data for the best crop.
So, and what's got the seed producers very interested in this is they can then put on the back of a packet of seeds.
Yeah.
If you're looking for the best yield, it's going to be in a fabric pot. It's going to be
this temperature, this humidity.
This humidity. Give sort of an environment recipe.
So these people don't know what strain or seed they've got?
They know for this very first one, they know who it's from.
Yeah.
And they may know the name, but they don't know the lineage. This is a new one that's coming out. So again, when we spoke to a lot of seed breeders in the States, when we were over there in the beginning of the year, a lot of them were saying the problem with testers is they don't get the information back in a consistent way.
Yeah.
And, a tester will go, oh, your plants are no good, or your nutrients are no good. It didn't do anything. It, got shit results. And they're going, well, how did you grow it? Or how are you using the nutrients? And they go,
but 100 people who take 100 of the same seed can all grow it a different way, where you're just logging the data now, aren't you?
Yeah.
And then
reporting back on
results.
It.
Yeah. And for the best results.
And our journal allows you to define the size of the room that you're growing in, what lights you've put in, the size of the pots and type of pots that you're growing in, along with the grow medium that you're using. So at the very end, you can actually see, well, fabric pots at 5 liters did better than
it's plastic 20 litre pots.
Yeah, exactly. You've got more empirical data to go with it. And the same starts to fit in for environment management.
Yeah.
Fabric pots generally create more humidity. Plastic pots will keep humidity down because of just the style of pot. Yeah. I could start to mix and match my fabric and my plastic pots together in a room humidity. Just to try and...
Exactly, and you don't have to artificially pump it in then because you've got the right combination of natural breathing from the roots versus the plastic pots.
Yeah. And then you've got lower electricity bills, less wear and tear on your equipment.
So basically on the back of the seed packet, it's going to tell me everything. How to tie my shoelaces, how to open the grow room door, it's going to tell me everything.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, it could.
It could, yeah.
It could.
It'll be in such fine print, you'll never be able to read it.
And for seed producers, generally speaking, the idea is, how can I get to see how this performs? How do my chilies actually perform in 100 different people's greenhouses?
Yeah.
When I'm growing chilies in a big greenhouse,
you might think you're doing amazing.
Into little pieces.
You could think you're doing amazing, but you've grew it the same way every time because it's worked for you.
Exactly.
But if 100 people or let 50 people take it and you all grow it a different way and you've got that data log to say, you've been doing well with it, but look what he's done with it. And there's what he's used, what he's done, humidity, temperature, pots, environment, feed, nutrients, and look what he's got back.
Yeah, exactly.
So this can work in a few ways as well. The group data logging is phenomenal. It could be the word game changing gets used for every new product that comes out, but it's going to be, we need a better word than game changer because everyone uses it. Like a new bottle of water comes out, it's game changing for water.
Future.
It's disruptive.
It's disruptive technology. It's the future. And I want to talk about both aspects of it, individual and group data logging. So group data logging, which is what you've been talking about, is going to be very interesting because eventually we're going to get to the point where we've found the genetic potential of these plants and we're going to know what recipe, environmentally, irrigationally, we're going to know environmentally,
hydroponically,
frequency of irrigation, amount of feed, plant manipulation. We're going to have in the next 10 years, if we have that much data, then the world's run on data. That's why Facebook does so well. That's why Google does so well. The biggest billionaires in the world right now are basically collecting data. Google, Amazon, Facebook, it's all data collection, isn't it? There's also a big stink about data collection when it's done what's the word? Subversively, that's what I was going for, yeah, because we don't know. But with this method where we know what we're doing it on purpose, this is going to be super interesting because you can have thousands, eventually millions of data points. And for every different genetic, every seed, we're going to know the best way to grow every single plant.
I mean, we really want to work with the likes of, the RHS and the Veg, I forget the name now.
Giant Veg Society.
The Giant Veg Society. But, for the RHS and that, where they are doing, they want to see how does a new crop of tomatoes perform. Work with them to actually get that data in. Food production is a serious thing. It's not, you need to be good at it. You need to be efficient at food production. Information around how to produce food more efficiently for the population, that shouldn't be, necessarily kept secret.
Imagine we found a way to grow our crops And because of your data loggers, one farmer decided to use microbe X, and that meant that he could reduce the amount of phosphorus used by 20%. And then he actually got better yields, and he spent less money because he's putting on less fertilizer and there's less phosphorus runoff. Like the implications of what you're doing with data logging could be world changing. Like, and it'll just be that one spark that would be missed. And this is why when me and Barry talk about pHing and ECing and measuring water temperature and trying to keep a bit of a tracker, a diary. And this moves me on to my next point of the individual use of the Minder, is that we know when we did well, and we can then refer back to that and go, that needs to be replicated. And the example in hand is Dale Toten. He's just recently won quite a few world records, quite a few UK records. And I don't think he was using a data logger. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think he was using a data logger at the time. Had he been using a data logger, he could have gone back and gone, wow, I've done even better than I thought it was going to do.
And
how the fuck did I do that? So that was my temperature, that was my humidity, this is what I fed them, this is the humidity, this is the air movement I had. Right, I need to replicate that in the majority of them to try and find my newest genetic, and then I'm going to try and improve on that on this room to get an even better world record. So for individual growers, the likes of Dale Totens who are going for world and UK records, it's going to be really important.
I mean, it's that ability to be able to say, that's what I did, that's the result I got. And then what I can do is I'm just going to change this one value, because that's always the catch when you do something new, is you change too much at once.
Yeah, and then you don't know which one it was that worked.
And the other problem with keeping a journal or logging things is, it's a pain in the arse to do. 9 times out of 10, it's writing it down, and that's the pain. So with the platform, it's been designed, okay, the first time you have to do some initial setup, defining the room and the space. But once you've done that, it should now be a very easy task just to click a button and say, I watered it, or I watered it with 2 liters, pH was this, ppm, et cetera, So we allow you to log either just I watered it, I fed it, or I can actually tell it how much I watered it, how much I fed it. You can give it the extra detail if you want to do that.
Now let's fast forward 10 years. And I wrote a bit of a story article on this in 2 editions ago of Garden Culture, I believe, or the last one. It was a story article where we were sat on a beach. And
the reality.
The reality, yeah. So let's fast forward. It might not even be 10 years. You can give us a bit more of an accurate time frame for this. When I love growing plants, and a lot of people say, but I love growing plants, I love being in my room. Sometimes there's just, you have to be away for a week, whether it's business, whether it's holiday, whether it's family or commitments, whatever it is, sometimes you've got to be away. At what point do you foresee that the Minder and the associated technology that you're going to be bringing out in the future means that I can be in Switzerland doing a video for SANlight, and I can look at my room and go, oh, humidity's going a bit up too high there, needs to be brought lower. And I've just realised what I've done. I'm actually foreseeing being able to make changes. I remember last time I had a conversation with you, you've even gone one step ahead where there's no need to make changes. Talk about that.
Well, right now, as it stands, we do have the controller. We're just waiting to get that into production in terms of CE certification. We've got the initial redesign of circuit boards coming out so that we can turn it into production product.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had people running this for a while. It's very different when you control something in terms of we've got to be really sure it's working in the functionality. So right now with the Minder unit, you could be sitting anywhere in the world, and as soon as, and there's a big difference with air comfort, for example. You can be sitting in Jamaica tomorrow, temperature goes high, you'll get an email that tells you the temperature just spiked. It was this sensor that triggered it. Your trigger level was this, and this is the reading it got. And it will continue. Well, you can tell it to keep telling you every 15 minutes until it's correct. When it does go back into normal operating parameter that you set, it'll notify you that it's gone back into normal operating parameter. So usually you get that email about 10 steps before you get in the front door. Now you can turn around and go back to the party.
Yeah.
So already it gives growers peace of mind when they're not there.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's one of the things that almost all of our North American customers say is, I can go to the cinema, I can take a weekend, I can have a holiday, I don't have to be there.
Yeah.
In terms of the control side, yes, it's already doing that. Our controller takes feedback from the sensors. you tell it these are the parameters that you need to operate in, and away it goes. And as soon as, for instance, it gets above a certain humidity, you've told it this socket is connected to something that will bring the humidity down.
Yeah.
It'll turn that on until the humidity is back to where it needs to be. The same goes for turning a humidifier on to bring the humidity up, and extraction or AC to do temperature heaters.
So we're going to get to a point where once this is fully programmed and you've input all of your parameters, then humidifiers, dehumidifiers, AC, heating, everything that you need to run your grow room properly and efficiently, the air comfort and the associated future tools that are going to come with it will just be working quietly in the background. So humidity's gone up too much, let's kick in the dehumidifier. Humidity drops down. Humidity goes too low, kick in the humidifier, and it's going to start running really balanced. And this is what we can expect to see in the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Less.
I think you can expect to see that a lot sooner. I mean, we'll have our product out in the market before the end of the year.
Yeah.
And, it goes... One of the nice things about doing this from a software perspective, and where our whole ethos has been to make the devices fairly cheap. I mean, we're an Internet of Things business, so everything needs to be connected to the internet, to the cloud, to our platform. But that allows us to make a hardware that's incredibly high in functionality, but incredibly cheap as well, because we don't have any intellectual property sitting on those devices.
Yeah.
We make them as dumb as they can be. Also means nobody can do anything with it. They can't be malicious with it, because you can't write to these things. You can't control them. You can't tell them to do stuff or overtake them.
Yeah.
But that means, our controller that at the moment, don't hold me to it, but we're looking at a retail price of about £500. We say, okay, that sounds a bit expensive, but it does lights, pump scheduling, fans for extraction, heating, AC. Your pump schedule can be linked to your light schedule, so you can tell it never turn the pumps on if the lights are off. If you update your light schedule, it just automatically follows you around. Not so big deal when you've only got one pump, one light, but think of a slightly larger installation. It's 100 pumps, 100 lights, and I've now got to figure all of this out. Or I'm growing in my greenhouse outside and I want to do daylight extension, but I want to only, between January and February, it needs to come on at this time, and again at this time at the end of the day, and then throughout the year that changes. If you're prepared to tell us what your postcode is, well, we'll know what the sunrise and sunset is, and you can just tell us, just add 2 hours on each side. And then as the year progresses, it just naturally follows that. So this is all functionality that's there.
Yeah.
Again, by not putting it all in that device, where we now have to worry about all of that intellectual property sitting in that device, you can go and buy them now. They cost you $5-6 grand.
Yeah.
It's not £500. And the same with the Minder units. The idea there is that they're modular small units. They come in at £99.95 if you're buying them retail. And we've just introduced a subscription model if you wanted to subscribe. It's like a mobile phone. You pay a monthly fee and you get the device thrown in. We've had a number of our commercial customers are very interested in that, because for them it's an OPEX expense. It's not a capital expense.
Yeah.
And they can just expand on it as they go. And with that, you'll always have the full history of data. Our $99.95 one, you get a rolling 4 weeks, and you can buy extra data when you need it. But with that, again, you're getting a lot of data. You're getting all the charting that comes with it. You're getting alerts that you can set up. You can group things logically in the journal. It's a lot of functionality for £99. It's a hell of a lot that you're getting.
These devices sound amazing.
We have 4 to give away.
It's competition time. That's my shout. I usually run the competition and get Steve to sort it all out after.
This is great. Tell us about it, Barry. What are you going to do?
I don't know what. I'll leave that to you. I just say, we're doing a big giveaway. It's this, and this. Steve sorts it all out.
What should we do? So we've got 4 to give away.
Yep.
So 2 for the people watching live, and 2 for the people listening on the Sunday or whenever you do download the podcast. So for the people watching live, what should we do for you? What should we do for the people watching live? What's fair? What is fair? Okay, for the people on podcast listening, when you've downloaded it, if you
have to involve their Instagram, you have to join their Instagram.
You got to follow. What's your Instagram tag?
PL Grow Systems.
Okay. So you've got a direct message. You've got to follow PL Grow Systems, and then you've got a direct message them saying, I want to be a grow room technician. You've got to message them that. The first 2 people to do that, not watching live, first 2 people that are listening to the actual podcast.
So the podcast comes out. So the podcast comes out.
Brian, if you're listening, get it on that.
So only from 12.
No, from 12 o'clock.
From 12 o'clock on Sunday.
The first 2 people that listen to the podcast downloaded the actual podcast, not live.
So 2 live now, 2 live Sunday when it goes out.
Yeah. Which is not live, it's recorded.
Yeah, it's recorded.
So
why'd they say that?
Yeah. Right. So you've got to message P&L Grow Room Systems and say, I want to be a grow room technician, and then we'll talk and we'll either get it sent out to you or you can come pick it up from the shop if you are.
It's PL Grow Systems.
PL Grow Systems.
Yeah.
And for the people watching live, Josh has just messaged there, at PL Grow Systems, I want to be a grow room technician. I don't know whether it's like a heads up, this is what you should be doing, or Josh wants to be a grow room technician. Right, for the live people, what should we do? You've caught me off guard live here. What?
We'll come up to me before the end.
Ask a question.
Oh, great.
About VPD. Ask a question about VPD. Yeah,
Thanks.
Pressure off me. My VPD's just gone right now.
VPD.
Think of a question, and the first 2 people, or the first person to answer this first question, can have a controller.
Oh, it's going to be a controller.
A minder.
They've just shit themselves. Like, thousands of pounds.
I'm sure I'll think of a question in a second.
Okay.
Definitely. But I just wanted to show some of the differences when it comes to data loggers. One of the real challenges you have with a data logger, of course, is how much data that starts to spew out.
Yeah.
You talk about going in and recording it, writing it down, what you may be going 3 times a day. You're getting 3 data points a day.
This is working 24 hours a day.
This is working 24 hours a day, every 30 seconds. It's just pushing data out there, which does present the problem of you've got to know how to then handle all of that data to make sense of it. You can look at standard timeline charts, which will just show you how things have been going over time. And that works really well by, look at a week, look at a month. When it starts to get beyond that, it gets a bit difficult, especially when you want to see the real granularity of it. But when you start to then take lots of data and view it in slightly different ways, you can really uncover some interesting things about what's going on in your environment. And if we could get the green slide, I think it was called.
Oh, he's got the P&L Grow Systems up, which has got the Instagram so people can
okay, cool.
Can look at that. So I'm going to come up with the first question. It's going to be first hand to the buzzer. What does VPD stand for? And I want it spelt correctly, and that'll mean that everyone's going to go, how do you spell deficit again? Because I always mess up the spelling of deficit. So there's the clue as well. There's what the D stands for, dickhead Steve. What does VPD stand for? First person to comment the right answer, spelled correctly, gets a Mindy unit. So,
okay, yeah,
go on.
I'll come up with this. I've got the second question.
Okay, we'll do that again once
we'll
this first one comes up. So the question is from Lee: the VPD in the dark, maintaining VPD through light on and light off. So it's essentially like your extraction, your intakes. These VPD is linked to humidity and temperature. So how do you maintain that VPD with the lights on and the lights off?
With either a humidifier or dehumidifier is probably the easiest way to do it, because you need to either take it out when it spikes when the lights go off.
Or put it back in.
Exactly. And those are the 2 easiest means.
Humidifiers and dehumidifiers keep that VPD in the right range.
I mean,
and those are ones that can then, it's going to have to be temperature and a humidifier and dehumidifier. See, this is where it gets complicated now, because now you're having...
Oh, only now? It only now gets... Okay.
Well, the bit that gets complicated now is you have to...
My head's gone.
You're having to control temperature and humidity to keep the VPD where it needs to be. So, that's where, again, what we have, and I've been playing around with for a while, is a VPD control function where you tell it, this is the target VPD that I'm actually after.
And it will adjust your
And what it then
lights.
does is, it tracks the current temperature, and it will start to increase or decrease humidity based on, because that's the fastest one to usually play around with. And the cheapest one to play around with is humidity. And it can then increase and decrease the humidity depending on what the current temperature is to keep the VPD at you've set it like
Steady.
8.
Yeah.
So it'll just keep it at 8. So it doesn't matter if the temperature goes like to 30, your humidity will go up to like 100. If it comes down to 5 degrees centigrade, your humidity will come down to about 2%. So
I've got a problem. So 2 people have answered pretty much at exactly the same time, and one of them has spelt it the American way, VAPOR, and Anita spelt it the English way, VAPOUR.
Well, what's the way they spell it?
the Australian way, mate.
The Australian way, mate. Fuck.
It's and vapor spelt in the Australian way is it's fucking humidity, you dickhead.
Yeah.
That's how you spell it in Australia.
Give it to the one who spelt it the way they spell it.
Well, I'm assuming the person
Unless you've
who
got more to give away.
the person who spelled it with the American spelling is probably in the States, and that would make
Unfair.
postage.
Is he in the States though?
So, Indic Head Shop, if it has to go to the States, would be hard. If it's in UK, I reckon we can sort it. I reckon I could sort one for the vapor for the American guys, because we've got the majority of our
We'll make
listeners
it
that are
happen.
American.
We'll make it
So,
happen.
Indica, Anita, we're going to make it happen. And thank you for bringing up English, American
Fucking hell, mate.
spelling.
Letter deficit.
Letter deficit, yeah. Have you got a question now for the next ones?
What's good?
So who's this for?
This is for one more.
One more.
Would a cactus and a tomato? I'm trying to
This
think.
sounds
I'm
like a
trying
joke.
to think of.
Fuck it.
Oh, what
A
I'm trying to do is
cactus and a
think of
tomato walk into a bar.
Which one has a higher vapor pressure deficit?
The tomato says, "Don't save him, he's a prick."
Neither the vegan ate and both at the door.
It's got that.
It's to highlight if would a VPD of 8 for on the spot's a bit tricky. And I know the question I want to ask, and I mean maybe it's just more to talk about it, is a cactus and orchid growing in the tropics. They could both have exactly the same VPD.
Yeah.
I mean that clearly they have 2 very different environments. It's not as though the cactus environment may be completely different. There's the weird thing is it creeps in where
you've got to be plant specific.
You've got to be plant.
Is this the question?
No.
He knows what the question is, but it's like
You can't explain it.
yeah, it's like me sometimes when like you know so much about a subject. And you try
Oh,
and get
listen
it-
to you when you
about-
know so much about something. It's
Comic
hard
books.
to explain to someone who hasn't got a fucking clue,
You
mate.
do it all the time when you're trying to explain to me why my fucking Vauxhall won't start. Well, what's going on, Steve? Your carburettor's manifold is gunked up with PTF fucking fluid. I'm like, what are you got? You're like, I've just explained it simply. Like, no, you haven't, Barry. So there you go. When you know so much about the subject, giving you the props there about cars, dickhead.
Come on, hurry up.
So, where are we up to?
Oh, come on, Lee, think of a question.
Come on, Lee.
All right, on the spot.
Well, you can talk about that. I point to that to everybody.
Yeah, Josh can get that up on the screen now. So the on the screen behind us, Josh can get that up on the YouTube screen. And for the people on the podcast, it is, I will put this picture up on my Instagram story on Monday evening, so you'll be able to see this picture. 'Cause to be fair, it's a bit boring to put on my main story, so I'm not going to put it there. It's going to go onto just a 24-hour story.
Nice.
It looks like green splodges.
Yes, it does look like green splodges. And so this is one environment. And actually what I've done on this chart is put the 5 boxes where the 5 sensors are placed in the actual grow room.
Yeah.
So this is looking at VPD and humidity. It's VPD along the bottom, it's humidity readings across the top. And this is where you get the cross point. So every time it takes a temperature and humidity reading, it's also calculating VPD, and it's showing you the density of plots that are falling in that range. So the darker the green, the more times it hits that spot.
Yeah.
And you can see how they're distributed around. And if you're looking at that, everything looks kind of the same. I mean, there's no really big swing differences in those.
It looks like a map of New Zealand.
That doesn't look like a bad grow room to me.
No, it doesn't. No.
It's 50 to 70 average?
This is why New
Humidity,
Zealand
sorry.
never... Sorry.
Got a bit of a spike on that one.
So, and this is why New Zealand never appears on the map, because we took it and used it.
I think I know now how Barry feels sometimes when I'm talking science.
No, I just go to sleep. You must have listened
That's
to the
it.
podcast.
That's
So if you put on the blue chart,
So Josh, you're going to throw
switch
up
it over to the blue one.
Blue chart.
which again is exactly the same data of the same time frame. And by the way, this is roughly 200,000 data points per chart there. So that's 4 months worth of data gathered. Now you're looking at this and you can see one of them is clearly different to the others.
Yeah, the bottom left.
The bottom left. And it turns out that that's actually the one by the door.
Because it's getting all the...
Every time people are going in and out. You can see how well controlled that environment is, because this is looking at temperature and just humidity.
Yeah.
So you can see the rest of the room is really keeping it locked in. But just by that front door, suddenly you've got a much wider swing in temperature. The humidity band is still tight, but the temperature swing is wider.
And you know, any plant that's in that area is not going to perform as well as the rest of them. And yet, if you only had one sensor in the middle of the room, you wouldn't have known, because the centre of the room says everything's hunky-dory.
Centre of the room's that one. It's only there.
Exactly.
In there is that.
And whereas you now know that anything that's in that corner, it's not going to do as well. So you either make a change, get more air circulation. When you see it like that, it gives you the ability to try and make the adjustment to rectify it if you can.
I'd also like to say thank you to the both of you, because VPD, for me, would be off limits. I'm not about to start walking around a room with a infrared thermometer gun. I'm definitely not about to start doing those calculations that you're required to do to get VPD. So you've come up with the minder that is just going to give it to you in layman's terms, which is, it's great for me. It's especially great for Barry. And just makes everything super easy. Barry's been sat out in the sun today. He's gone.
Look at that.
He's got his arms are red and his shoulders are white.
And what we've done on our platform as well is we've made it so that the charts will show you where like the optimum VPD would be. So when they come in, if customer comes in, they're using our product, they could walk into the shop, they can go to Barry and say, Barry, I'm having problems with my grow. Barry can actually flip down and look at the VPD chart and go, ooh, you're driving your plants way too hard, or you're not driving them at all. That's why they're not doing, your VPDs are 3.
You just touched on a great point as well, is that what people can do is, rather than people coming into the shops and going, this is wrong, that's wrong, more often than not, that's not what's wrong at all. You've just guessed, or you've come in and you've been lazy and completely wrong. I think I've overwatered my plants, and if you could look at them, they were probably bone dry. You're just looking at the plant and they haven't just taken the time to lift the pot up, and it's super light. What you can do with the minder, you can actually take the data to the shop and you can go, well, it's obvious your lights went off, your humidity shot up, and you didn't extract it out. So that's why you've got powdery mildew. And then it's been resolved a lot quicker, and it's going to be fixed a lot quicker as well. And you can do this with the minder, can't you? So the shops need to, tell everyone again the Instagram, because if grow shops around in the UK and the US or anywhere in the world, they want to use them to get a better idea of what's going on in the customer's room so that they can help them better, just shout them out your Instagram again where they can message you. Instagram
is at plgrowsystems. The website is plgrow.systems, no .com or anything. My email address is peter@plgrow.systems, and Lee is lee@plgrow.systems. We have a general info at plgrow.systems, pretty much everything at plgrow.systems.
Good stuff. And then just before we finish, we're going to have about another 5 minutes left. What got you to this point? So where have you come from?
What's your background, mate?
Well, my background happens to be in financial market data, coming from the city, which this might seem a bit of a strange changeover, but being an avid horticulturist for 20 years, eventually the city was enough's enough. And what we started off as just a little project for ourselves, which was to solve a problem. We want to be able to take a holiday, go somewhere, see what's going on when I'm not there.
But look after everything at home.
Yeah, curious mind. You want to know what happens in that room when I'm not in that room, or in my greenhouse when I'm not there. Nice. And we started to just publish photographs of what we're doing, and that had people go, "Oh, where do I get one?" And that just started to build up. And then we went, well, this is going to become a company. And then I eventually last year actually went, bucket, quit the job in the city and started doing this. So my background is big data, as in big data systems, and all of the requirements that go with that from a financial banking perspective, the data security, the ownership of data, the full
exactly
data
what I was
process.
going to speak about next is every day in the news you hear about it's either Google or it's Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram and some social medias, or all social medias, Google data collecting. You had the Facebook Cambridge scandal, and people are worried about their data, and that's why I've mentioned your background, because being from, when we've known each other now for, well, how old's that orange man that I had?
Year and a half.
At least a couple of years, isn't it? And I've seen the progression. And the reason I ask about your background is that's one of the first questions. It's when you mention data collection, people instantly, the first thing that comes to the head is that, well, Facebook and all these big companies collecting data. I don't know if I like my data being collected because it's different, it's new, and I don't like new and different. And the way you reassured me was that the security of these devices is at the highest level, because, like you say, you come from the financial sector, collecting big data for companies that were moving millions of pounds, billions of pounds, you're moving billions of pounds, and there's nothing more precious other than time than billionaires' money. And
what's your background?
In charge of that.
I'm sure
I've been a hardcore IT geek for the last 20 years, but I've always been a scientist at heart. I converted my diesel car to run off waste vegetable oil and did nearly 20,000 miles on it.
No, we've got 5 minutes, Barry. Look at his eyes light up. Jesus Christ, I'm getting off.
I'm
sure the table
now.
Just rose on that.
It did, and this is like a table. What did you mention that for, Lee?
Just to give you an idea of my geekiness.
Well, Barry's going to get into this, and we've got. If you want to go on, we've got 10 minutes.
Oh, no, me too.
We've got 10 minutes, and Lee's going to probably get kept behind for about an hour after the podcast to talk about the conversion. That's interesting, though. It is genuinely interesting. I was just taking the piss out of Barry.
I mean, you make it. The thing about the data bit. I mean, it is an interesting piece that comes up, and what are we going to do with the data? How are we going to play with it? What is it that we're doing? We're using the data to make the system better, to better understand what is actually going on. No one piece of data or one grow is actually worth anything. It doesn't tell you anything. You need to see a lot of data to see the correlation, to understand what I do here, what the effect is there. And the only way you can ever do that is with a huge amount of it.
Because then you're just extracting bits of it.
Yeah, so the data is completely anonymized. I don't want to know whose data it is, but what I do want to be able to see is, if I'm trying to work out what's going wrong in my grow environment. So I'm seeing plants aren't looking how they should look. Everybody's telling me they should be. Something's not right. But if I could take my grow room data and say overlay it with everybody else who's growing in the same size,
then you can eliminate and say, well,
and I can see,
it's not humidity, and it's not my light pattern,
exactly.
It's not that, but look at that there.
So in terms of our use of the data to provide for our customers, provide them with that extra information, the ability to predict where your environment will be. I mean, right now, I can tell you where your environment will be within 2 degrees centigrade and about 3% humidity in 2 weeks' time, so long as you don't do anything drastic. So your early warning system for powdery mildew, when you see it, it started 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So if you know back then what's going on, the only way we can do that is if we gather enough information. Our platform isn't free. When you think about Google, Facebook, it's free. You're the product.
Yeah.
They're looking to sell the data on elsewhere.
To you.
That's why we charge a small amount for using the platform, because we don't have to have advertising. We don't have to do those bits to it. We're using the data for ourselves. Commercial customers who want it to learn about what they're doing, great. They have a environment that's hosted just for them, and it will learn what they're doing. It's not shared with everybody else.
That's excellent.
And our idea isn't to sell the data. I mean, you would have heard of the whole Phylos scandal. That becomes a case of, well, what could they actually do with that data? What did they gather? And what information is there?
Yeah. What you could do with our data is go, all right, so my tomatoes and my mint collection, they need a higher humidity, and they're going to sell that data to the Australian mint collection, the bastards.
You can see the RHS, Marjorie down the road said she was growing tomatoes at 23, it's 27, the line, bitch.
Them vegetable growers are ruthless now.
Yeah, exactly.
They could be handy with those Stanley knives.
Sabotage and everything.
It's ridiculous. Now, super quick before we finish, Josh hates it when I use up portions of his internet, and I know that with kids that are gaming and wives that are looking on the shopping channel, if you haven't got the greatest internet and your Wi-Fi, there are other methods that you can use to use the minder other than your Wi-Fi through Sky or Virgin or BT. Is there any other methods that someone could use?
Yeah, we have a number of customers who are using them in their allotments where they don't have Wi-Fi, and they're using Dean Chili Loud.
Yeah,
he uses a dongle.
Okay.
Mark
Shepherd from the Georgia Giant Veg.
He uses it with the dongle as well, and I even think Geordie's using it with the dongle as well. So that's the way of getting it out there if you don't have Wi-Fi access. Yeah. If you're worried about it caning your bandwidth, you could get the smallest data package and you'll still
get
have
nowhere near it.
Okay.
It's very small amounts of data that it sends.
That's happy days, and that's perfect because when people realise that Mark and Dale, two of the best chili and ornamental flower growers in the UK, are using them, and they're like, well, I can't use it because I'm in the greenhouse. We'll just give you the key for it. And Dale, I'll probably get an angry message off Dale and Mark going, you bastard, that was our little fucking hell, Steve. Come on. You're fucking tying hands behind our backs here. No, it's a good point in greenhouses or on allotments when you haven't got access to Wi-Fi. You can use a phone, dongle, or whatever you need.
It extends beyond monitoring the grow environment. So for the allotment grower who's now transporting his flowers from point A to point B, you've got to make sure that when they're being transported, they're kept at the right temperature and humidity in their transport truck. Our device allows you to pair it to a mobile phone as an access, fire up your mobile phone as an access point, pair it to the phone, leave it sitting in, you just attach a battery pack to it, leave it sitting in the truck. And now you've got a record of, while it was being transported, the temperature and humidity the whole way, along with all the alerts. Sorry.
That's fine.
It's not. I want to know what you were going to say.
There's so many uses for the data above and beyond just growing. It's the easiest way. It can really help growers, but there's so many other applications for it. For example, curing.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that it's not going to be too moist for too long. You could have a dehumidifier attached to the controller as an example, using that to make sure that it keeps it just at the right level. There's so much more you can do with the data.
And I reckon there's so much scope that maybe you haven't even thought about. There's going to be growers start using and go, could use it for this.
But it's you guys who were using it to tell your ISP, hang on, we've got a crap internet connection, because the number of times it was going, oh, you're disconnected. Oh, you're back again. Oh, you're disconnected. My father's done the same. He had talk in and went, no, and I'll show you the log, and just pulled up email logs and went, don't argue.
Mark on it with that as well.
Yeah.
Also, if you haven't thought about it, I know that I'm going to talk about these vicious veg growers again just before we finish, is that I know that Mark had a problem and has a problem 2-3 times last year with somebody breaking into his greenhouse. It's locked up, like he's growing award-winning dahlias here, and Gary's growing award-winning biggest vegetables, and there's other competitors
breaking in, sabotaging,
killing everything. So if he's using the minder and he's got his dongle,
he'll know
exactly,
because the pressure will drop or that'll go.
Something will happen that's not normal.
Yeah,
and you'll know it,
and you might fucking catch them.
Yeah, he doesn't have to use his badger cam.
Is that a camera on a badger?
Yeah, it's a GoPro strapped to a badger with rockets on it. So don't go anywhere near Gary's allotment because he's gone Arnold Schwarzenegger with this shit.
Imagine there'll be some booby traps on there, mate.
Angry badger.
Yeah. Don't go there just because it's a booby trap. It's not boobies. Before you get carried away with yourself.
I have to put up with these one-liners all the fucking time. It doesn't have to get boring,
Right. Do you have any other questions?
I don't.
You good? Yeah. You're happy with VPD? A good understanding of VPD?
Yeah,
I'm happy.
So.
I'm happy.
I'm gonna have to learn it though.
I'm gonna have to learn it. I think everybody.
You learn it and then you just tell me.
Yeah, as normal.
Yeah, as normal.
Yeah. So for everyone that's listening, if you're thinking, oh my God, I've just found out about this VPD and I don't understand the fucking thing about it, then welcome to the club. So I don't understand, in the big scheme of things, I don't understand about VPD. You've got to go away and just put the time and effort into learning it. And the most important thing is download a graph, and one that you can have a play with, an interactive one, so you can actually put in your real-time temperature, real-time humidity, look at your VPD, and it's got lovely wave-type graphs. So if you're in the green, perfect. If you're in the amber, well, you need to maybe make a slight modification. If you're in the red, you need to get to the grow shop and buy the right piece of kit to get it back into the green zone. So thank you very much. That's been a great introduction to VPD.
Yeah, well,
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
P&L Grow Systems.
Yeah.
Give them your website and Instagrams one more time before we sign off.
So the website is plgrow.systems, and the Instagram account is @plgrowsystems.
Perfect. Right, I've got 1 minute to answer 2 questions, and these are random questions, but I've got to answer them because I won't get a chance to next week. First one, at the very beginning, somebody asked about AutoPots and how often they should turn the tap on and off. That is going to be covered
next week. So just make sure
you're with us next week. Good tagline to get them rewatch next week. And the last question was, it was just a bit further up, organic versus mineral newts. So basically, in a nutshell, mineral nutrition is much more accessible to the plants, more readily available, and you're probably going to get a better result with mineral nutrition. Organic, plants are going to be happier. You're going to build an ecosystem within the soil, and you're going to potentially get you're going to get the true genetic outcome of the plant. The plant can do what it wants to do naturally, and it tends to give you better flavors. You don't have to measure EC, you don't have to measure pH. Make sure you're on top of your microbes, and they are basically 2 complete polar opposites of growing. Mineral is great, you give the plant what it wants, exactly when it wants it. Organic, you tend to have healthier plants, better sugar content, more oil production, and a truer genetic showcase of what that plant can do. So that's those 2 questions. Hopefully that answered it sufficiently. Everybody that's been watching live, thank you very much. We've had, I think, a good few people popping in and out, 15 people watching now. Thank you, everyone that's been commenting. Really appreciate it. I know Josh has been staying on top of the comments. Thank you very much for everyone listening on the podcast. And thank you very much to Peter and Lee for joining us for podcast 176.
Thank you very much.
And also just one last thing, this Sunday at 9 p.m. UK time, find us on the YouTube channel Operation Grow. We're doing another live this Sunday.
So that would be, if you're listening on YouTube, that's this Sunday at 9 p.m. If you're listening to the podcast and you've downloaded it as soon as it comes out, it's at 9 o'clock tonight. So go to YouTube, type in Operation Grow.
You'll see which one's ours. Yes.
Yeah, and you'll be able to check it out. Thank you very much, Coatsy. That's a wrap. Let's go.